Well, welcome everybody. We're honored and delighted that you're here with us today to be part of this conversation about first century Aramaic forgiveness. And I'm going to start right in with a little bit of reading from Why Is This Happening to Me Again? We're in the, chapter 14, Choosing Teachers, is where we've graduated to, page 79 if you're reading along with us. And we're talking to Richard, this character in the book, about the Aramaic language and kind of extending our conversation from the last chapter, talking about how distorted the Aramaic words have become in the Greek to the English translations. And my last comment to him in the reading we did on Friday, was, the translations appear sound, but are twisted just enough to cover up the wisdom that was available through the original words. I'm always amazed by people who study Greek interpretations, often called translations of Aramaic teachings, and have no interest in the actual meaning of what they've studied. Without access to the originally intended meanings, which can only be understood through a mechanism of through a comprehension of the conceptual framework of the Aramaic mind, it's difficult for people to apply the tools that were originally taught. Sound teachings have gone from being practical and down-to-earth tools to being impractical and unattainable. As a result, people miss out on the knowledge, understanding, healing benefits, and comfort provided by the original teachings. Of course, we're talking here about the fact that the ancient Aramaic language is the root language of what stands as the foundation for at least 5 of the world's major religions. And, when you stop and think about it, you say, well, boy, that must be quite a religious language, that Aramaic. Actually, it's not a religious language at all. It's a language of physics. It's a language of psychology. It's a language of physiology. It's a language of genetics. When you go back to the Aramaic, the roots. But then when you move to a language that doesn't have the level of confidence in understanding those subjects, then everything becomes shaky. And as it moves from a translator to translator, going from the Aramaic in which it was originally written, even though the Greeks will tell you, oh, no, we wrote it. No. I know Western scholarship wants to make that claim, but it's just silly. It's just, not even the least bit tenable. In any event, as we get further away, Aramaic, Greek, Old English to modern English, it gets further and further away from the truth. And I believe, personally, that the reason it's the root of at least 5 of the world's major religions, because it had those understandings in its origins. And, of course, men have misinterpreted. So Richard asked the question, well, why would the teaching be distorted? There's 3 possibilities that I see. One is the expression of the ideas could have been limited by the ability of the language into which they were translated. Recall, the two-dimensional creature, and this is an earlier example that we used. Recall, the two-dimensional creature we talked about earlier had no words to express the truth about the three-dimensional world. Language can only express understanding for which it has words. Second possibility is the level of understanding of the translators, who had little or no actual experience with the transforming power of the Aramaic teachings, without realizing that they watered down this powerful ancient wisdom to their limited capacity. Can you possibly translate something beyond your level of comprehension? I'm not sure what you're saying, Michael. Well, let's use an example. Would you want to go to a chemistry lab and perform a complex and dangerous experiment on the instructions of a first-year chemistry student? who doesn't even know the language of higher chemistry? Well, of course not. I want a competent, experienced instructor who knows exactly, who knows. That's what I need. I would at least want the input of someone who had actually performed the experiment and had it work, came the emphatic reply. And it's interesting that, if you look at this teaching, you hear this man in Aramaic speak of living life in and out of the experience of love and doing that with great gusto. And then you hear people raging and screaming, supposedly based on those texts, but they're raging and screaming from the content of their own minds, not anything based on the texts that they're supposedly representing. And we've spent years, or in the original translation work that we had 25 translators who were really, some of the top Aramicists in the world, and they spent, countless hours, countless dollars working to come up with the first century meaning of the Aramaic words as the context and the content in an accurate representation of their meanings in the first century. And of course, if you wander away from that experience, you try to use words to describe an experience, you go, well, I haven't had this experience, so these words don't fit. And you start substituting words, you start substituting ideas, and it's just, it's mind-boggling. So what we're looking to do is to stick with, we've actually got a 4-hour video called Aramaicisms. And in the Aramaicisms video, a scholar named Dale Allen Hoffman and myself spent 4 hours in a discussion. The word Aramaicisms is the word that I coined to represent our effort to get back to the being, in full agreement with and restoring the fidelity of the meanings of those words in their original context. When you have the brain cells to do that, all of a sudden, everything in those texts take on such significance and such power. But absent the experience and the verbiage to represent it, it gets lost. Let's take just one word. The question is asked of this man Yeshua: What do I have to do to really live a human life? What's first, they say to him, in the law of being human? And we're told by the Greeks, he said, well, just love the God and love your neighbor as yourself. Then you're rocking. Of course, sadly, many people are following that rule, and there's so much self-hatred, and that's one of the reasons why we have so much abuse and violence in the world. People are doing exactly that. But that isn't even a shadow of the representation of what he said in the first century Aramaic language. What he said in that language was, have Rachma when you think of the Creator, have Rachma when you think of your neighbor, and by so doing, you will maintain self. Now, of course, you got to know what Rachma means. What is Rachma? Rachma is a filter in the frontal lobes of the brain that is a gateway for the entry of love into the human form, the created essence that we are, love, to enter into the human form. If that's closed down, there's no human life in the human form. And people live in what the scriptures call the mind of man. And then there's living in the mind that was called, and again, this is thought to be a religious idea. There's nothing religious about it. You can live in the mind of man, or you can live in the mind of love, which in the ancient Aramaic was called the mind, the word the Greeks translated to, and which is used today generally, is Christ. But then that's thought to be some man's mind, and it's not. It's to live in the same mind that he lived in, to be of like mind with Christ. What mind is that? Read that passage, and it says, who thought it not robbery to be equal with the Creator and yet remain humble. In other words, instead of it becoming an ego trip, you live in the mind of love, which is literally the mind of the Creator. And when you do that, when you're facing, any ideas or any experience with the Creator or with a neighbor, and in Aramaic, neighbor means anybody that you think about, if you maintain the condition of love in your mind when you're thinking of neighbor, because you are love, you've maintained self. So it wasn't about, as yourself, love the neighbor as the self, but by Rahma being present, love, your created essence was present, and you were able to maintain your human life. People who don't know that think they can go off in a rage and off in a fit, and, they can sock it to that guy over there, and they're doing just fine. They have no idea they've destroyed themselves. It's just such a different mindset, such a different way of even conceiving of the world. And so we're here to reestablish those first century meanings. And of course, the key word, love, of course, is one of the words we're looking to reestablish. Rahma, we're looking to establish that because there's no such concept. There are many words in Aramaic that are represented by one word that it takes a whole paragraph to explain in the English language, because there's just no such concept. There's no such construct available to us. And so once you build the brain cells for those Aramaic meanings, all of a sudden this becomes a teaching on how your physiology works, how your perceptual constructs work, to either align and support you functioning as a human, or align with the world mind that takes this pure presence of love, and in the average case, if you've got seeing as how we're participating in raising this little one that just blesses us every day. She's now 32 months, circling, a little less than that, 31 months, I guess. And it's amazing that they can take someone who comes into the world as the pure presence of love, and within 2 years, notice they call it the terrible twos. They can have that mind so degraded that that child they refer to, that sweet presence they refer to, is terrible. I mean, how bizarre is that? And yet being fed the concepts, the insanity, the rages, the fears, the traumas of the world, of course one goes into, this is terrible, and starts to function on those, and then of course they're beat back into submission so that they behave, so that they conform to the norms of a culture based in rage and fear. Yeah, the kids are going to go through quite a traumatic time in doing that. And the result of that training, that hostility and fear-based training, they call that human life. In human life, love has been beat out of the child. Then, of course, the child is told, now go out that door and find somebody to love, or find somebody to love you. And love has become something that it isn't. Forgiveness has become something that it isn't. And concept after concept after concept after concept becomes something that it isn't. And so we're here to erase the conflicts, reestablish, understand ourselves, and reestablish in the world mind the actual meaning of those Aramaic teachings, and of course, in particular, the tool of forgiveness. Tool of forgiveness, which, if you look at that word in this culture, if you go along with the Greek idea, basically what they say is, in essence, well, they did something really terrible. That's why you're in pain, and it really is all their fault. But it's okay. You just forgive them, then everything will be okay. And we've been fed such a weak shadow of what forgiveness is. I have pain moving in me, so I'm supposed to let you off the hook so I can feel better. because the Greeks and basic soul is forgiveness is how I let you off the hook for what you did to me. What we're looking to do is to reestablish the meaning of the word forgive, which is a tool which, if I'm in pain, I recognize there's an energy in me causing my pain, and I will benefit and gain by removing the energy that causes my pain. And as I remove it, I'm restored to the mind of love, which is my birthright to think with. We're all given the same gift. It's our birthright. And the world mind has taken us so far from that it's just bizarre. And so our project together is to bring forward those first century words and to make them available, to create a permanent record on planet Earth. And I'm so appreciative of this technology that we have called Blog Talk, so that, a few minutes after the show is over, you can go to our website and you can download a copy of the show and have it in your in your phone or your computer or what have you. And that we have those archives for these conversations. It's such an awesome blessing. So we're delighted that you're here to be part of this conversation. And Miss Jean, do we have anybody out there in the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room?
It is quiet. Let's see. Lisa says she is on day 5 of a modified master cleanse. She's having a salad of fruit midday. If she's feeling extra hungry, she's doing a salad or fruit midday.
Nice.
Very good. We've done something similar to that here lately as well. We're not for straight days in a row, but that's good. We have done it in the past. We actually one time did 40 days of just juice for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then we've done 14 days straight on lemon water, cayenne pepper.
Back about 23 or 24 years ago, I did a 40-day fast on popcorn. That was kind of fun, kind of interesting. It's all I ate.
Now, Dad could do that.
Dad almost does that already, doesn't he? Geez, Dad, we buy this pre-made popcorn that he just loves, and I mean, there's always 10 bags of, like, huge bags of it in the house at this time. And 2 o'clock in the morning, we hear something going on downstairs. We'll go down, and there's Dad sitting at the kitchen table with his 3rd bowl of popcorn, or at 2 in the afternoon, or anytime, 10 minutes before dinner, we go down and catch him. Dad, put that away. We're getting ready for dinner. But anyway, yeah, it's interesting. One of the, and I've been thinking recently, I haven't mentioned this with you, but thinking recently about doing maybe an extended fast. It's just been coming to mind more and more. So sitting here, not being on the road and not exercising the way that, we normally did, hauling in tapes and books and out and, all of that. Could use a bit of an intermission of food and do that. But anyway.
I'd actually thought about doing that when we do our 10-day trip to St. Louis.
Yeah, the only thing is we're going to be hanging out with kids that are going to want to go out for dinner.
Yeah.
That probably wouldn't be the best timing.
Oh, we have a hand that just went up.
Oh, great. Let's say hello.
All right. Area code 205. You're on the air. Who do we have?
Hi, this is Bridget. Blessings to you.
Hey there, young lady. Welcome. Haven't heard your voice in a long time.
Yeah, it's been a while. But I have been working on the forgiveness and self-love and getting rid of negative energy.
Right.
And trying to understand what is it that I could be thinking or doing that is causing me to be so hypersensitive to the electromagnetic radiation that I feel it all of the time.
Right.
Yeah, that's what
well,
go ahead.
It's not something that I've spent a lot of time looking at. And so I couldn't point you in any given direction except to say that, when the energy system gets to its tolerance point of toxicity, and that could be any kind of toxicity. It could be toxicity from, mental energy patterns, physical, food, allergy, any number of things. But when it gets to its tolerance point, that's when any one of those things can push it over the edge. And so some people can hang out in electromagnetic fields and seemingly have no impact whatsoever. And as you say, you found yourself to be sensitive. So I'd be looking at what kind of things have I been engaging in? Am I eating clean food? Maybe organic? How am I doing with my relationships? Hostility and fear, is that much of a part of my life? And look at how many of those toxic loads you can let go of. And as you do that, the tendency usually then is, one of those things that we're hypersensitive to, the sensitivity will tend to reduce. It's been my experience of it. But I don't have any, it's not something I've specialized in or really looked at, specific thoughts or guidance on what is the electromagnetic toxicity about specifically.
Is that a question?
Have you come up with any clues? As you've been doing that?
Yes, I think a lot of it is because of negative circumstances and upbringing, false and ungodly beliefs, a wrathful fear of God that has been used to control and manipulate.
Yeah.
I think some of that has, is contributing to it.
Are you doing worksheets around those issues?
Say that again?
Are you doing worksheets around those issues?
Well, I'm actually just doing it on the phone. And, I'll write down my emotion score and then what I'm feeling and what I think the truth is about what I'm feeling. But I believe that a lot of it is something that I'm just not cognizant of because I thought that I was working through those and had gotten to a place of forgiveness, especially for my mother, who, the relationship has been very challenging and still is.
Mm-hmm.
So I have my boundaries, but doesn't seem to do any good because anytime there's an interaction, it becomes turbulent. So when I get off of the phone with her or interaction with her, I immediately go to something positive to restore myself.
Right.
And self-love and acceptance, and, that's not you, and you're worthy of the acceptance and love from your mother, and you're worthy to be, loved and respected, and that I don't have to, out of fear of God's wrath, have to take abuse. So,
sure.
I've been working through those things, and I really ponder on what is it that I am. It's got to be something in my subconscious. Because my immediate prayer and thoughts are for blessings and the joy for her, for me, and for anyone.
Right. Well, the thought that keeps coming that might be helpful, one of the tools that we've used over the years is there's a way, it's a pretty simple process, and if you like, we can guide you through it in regard to Mom and see if it makes an impact for you. But it's called emotional release, where if there are, when you get around her, all of a sudden all these emotional stirrings happen. It's, of course, because those emotions are still there, and there's attachment to, mom behaving a certain way, or those emotions come forward. And there's a really simple process where you center yourself inside your brain and just ask Ruka for support in releasing those attachments. It's a pretty simple process. It only takes a minute to do. And in fact, if everybody in the audience, if you've got anybody that, every time you get around them, their emotional responses, this tool can be a powerful release of those things. I've seen some people have used it and it hasn't been effective at all, but I've seen other people and it's really changed their relationships significantly. So if you'd like to do that release process around mom, we can do it right now.
Oh, yes, by all means.
Be glad to guide you through it. Okay. Well, then, as we're guiding you through it, we'll invite everybody who's listening, if there's somebody in your life that you feel you've still got some emotional responses to, then we'll invite you to follow these instructions and maybe over the next day or two or week or three, whatever, share with us. We'll call back and just see if you've noticed any differences. Again, I've seen people who have made major changes, especially in their immediate relationships, and other people that wasn't the issue, that wasn't the core of it, so it really didn't make much difference. But if you would just follow these instructions, we'll see what happens. And of course, when we get to the release phase, we're going to bring in the Aramaic idea of Ruka Dekudsha, and for anybody who may not be familiar, the Aramaic term is Ruka, Rukha, D apostrophe Koodsha, Ruka Dekudsha. Now they're the words that the Greeks translated as the Holy Spirit from the Aramaic language. But in Aramaic, there's nothing there about a disembodied spirit being or whatever. Ruka Dekudsha speaks of literally an elemental force in us. Fire is an elemental force. Wind is an elemental force. Well, there's an elemental force that the Aramaic peoples understood was a support energy that was implanted in every human mind from the beginning, and specifically, by definition in Aramaic, this elemental force, if enlisted, if invited into activity, undoes the effects of your errors and teaches you the truth. So that's what you're asking that power to do, and it's quite amazing when you allow that to open and let that energy flow. So when I invite you, I'm going to give you a release phrase, and the release phrase will start with asking that power for help, just so that you know what we're doing there and everybody else who chooses to do it. So what I'm going to do, there's a specific place in the brain that, if you're centered, seems to make this more effective. And that's what I've come to call the seat of the unconscious. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some visualization to guide you to be centered there, ask you to just let me know when you're centered, and then I'm going to invite you to allow a picture of your mother to come to mind. When you're centered in that place and that picture of your mother comes to mind, then I'm going to invite you to use the phrase, and we'll short form Ruka Dekudsha to just Ruka. Ruka, I ask for support in releasing all attachment to my mother. And of course, anyone else who does it, if it's your father or your uncle or your brother or your sister or even yourself. And let's see what happens. So in order to become focused in that place, I'm going to invite you to imagine that I have two pencils that are made of light. And I'm going to insert those through one of them, through the top of your head, right at the very top center, what they call the crown chakra. I'm going to ask you to imagine that we're placing a pencil of light right down through the center of the top of your head. And then a second pencil going right through the center of the forehead, what people call the third eye. And so if you imagine those two pencil tips of light being inserted, the point where they meet is the seat of the unconscious. It's the place where you can release those attachments. So I'm going to ask you to just imagine, whoever's listening going to do this exercise, imagine that I'm placing these two pencils, one in the top center of your head, one in your center of your forehead, and inserting the light, and where those two lights meet is where I'm going to ask you to center your awareness. And when you're centered there, just let me know. And, of course, I'm going to invite you to continuously be aware of your breath and keep it moving. So you're centered there now? Okay.
Yeah.
And now, staying centered in that place, allow a picture of your mother to come to mind, and let me know when you've got that.
Yes.
Okay. And then out loud, addressing and asking for support from this feminine elemental force in us that was known as Ruka. Repeat the phrase, Ruka, I release all attachment to my mother. And of course, anyone else is doing it would substitute the name of whoever they're doing it with. So breathe.
Yes. Ruka, I release all detachment from my mom.
And allow yourself to breathe. And what happens with that picture?
She's in Yeshua's arms.
Okay. And are you feeling anything in your head, your hands, anywhere in your structure?
In my hands or in my head, you think? No.
Okay. Just stay in awareness, stay focused there. And once again, Ruka, I release all attachments to my mother.
Is Ruka the same thing as Ruach, Holy Spirit?
Yes. It would. Yes.
Okay.
That's what the Greeks translated it as. Yep, that's it.
Ruach.
And in Aramaic, it's this. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. What was the phrase again?
Ruka, I release all attachments to my mother.
Ruach, I release all attachments to my mom.
And allow your breath to move. And what's happening?
Nothing.
Okay, well, most people, when they step in and do this exercise, we usually feel, that's why I asked about your hands, we usually feel some level of tingling in their hands, perhaps the feet, perhaps the face.
I do feel it in my feet.
Do you? Okay.
In my feet.
So that when
but I didn't know
most people feel in their hands, but I've had many people who feel it in their feet and or their face, or they might feel just a little bit lightheaded. So if you're getting that energy moving in your feet, that's the energy of the release happening.
Okay.
And it's that simple. Again, I've seen this make major changes for people in situations and circumstances. So we'll hope that maybe some of those major changes you're ready for, having done some work around Mom and ready for release from those emotional reactions.
And how often? Just every time I have a negative interaction or thought.
If they come around again, but you might notice that they disappear. That's a very common experience with people who do this release. It's just like that reaction's gone.
Oh, really?
So
okay.
let us know, the next time you interact, to keep us posted on what happens with it. And let's see if she and you both are freed from those kinds of reactions.
Ooh, that would be amazing.
Yes, I'm with
you.
you 100%. Yeah, you're most welcome, and keep us posted if there's any other support we can
I will.
Okay.
I will.
Any
Thank
other
you.
thoughts on your mind for today?
Getting healthy. I am eating clean, and I've bought body shields to help with the energy. Trying to get out of my apartment lease so that I can move to a more rural area around more country and nature. So
right, where you don't have the concentration of electromagnetic fields.
Yes.
Yeah. I have some friends who are quite electromagnetic sensitive, and at night when they're going to sleep, they have their things like refrigerators and such on a special circuit, and except for things like refrigeration or air conditioning or heating, they literally turn off their power box, so everything, all the electromagnetics in the house are shut down while they sleep, except for things like a refrigerator that needs to keep running.
I do the same.
The wall.
But I live in.
Do you?
But I live in an apartment. Yes, but I live in an apartment complex, and the energy is coming from below and behind me.
Yeah, that's definitely another level of challenge when you're in a common living situation like that. And oftentimes, buildings, apartment buildings have antennas on the roofs for, repeater signals and all that for cell phones and all kinds of crazy stuff with the electronic world that we're living in today. So.
Yeah, it's pretty severe, and it forces, my lifestyle. Because of this effectiveness, it's very difficult to concentrate and stay organized because I'm constantly having to leave my apartment and go ground myself because the energy is so strong, and I'm speaking healing over me, but it has been.
I'm with you on that.
Extreme. It's been extreme. Really difficult, it doesn't take much, and I can really feel it.
Well, a hold space that a rural setting just happens to pop up out of the blue that's a perfect setting for you, get you far enough away from those concentrated fields that you get to do some recovery, and that if there are any other, perhaps moving some of these blocks out of the way with Mom will open your intuition on a level as to other things that you can do to support yourself.
Yes. Say that last line again.
Just that as you remove these blocks, as you remove whatever blocks are there, oftentimes a block around one area of our lives will block other areas of our lives as well. And so I was just speaking of, the opening of intuition for you on another level for your guidance to let you know specifically what will be helpful. So hold the space that strengthens and opens and gives you the next level of guidance that you need to be able to just, move this whole issue out of your world.
I receive that. And I live in expectation that I will be completely healed from this.
And we're here to hold the space for that to happen.
Yeah, amen. Thank you so much.
All right, young lady. All right, lots of love and blessings. Take care.
Love and blessings. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, yeah, that's an issue that's becoming bigger and bigger on the planet all the time with all the different electromagnetic devices that the world is developing and 5G coming in. Of course, there's a lot of conspiracy theory stuff around that, but, we are, no question about it, electromagnetic beings. And, of course, when electromagnetic fields come along that operate in the same range as, say, let's say our own cells, our own genes, our own minds, then those energetic patterns can definitely be a challenge. And, of course, intuition functioning and keeping ourselves in alignment with the highest and best can at least minimize those impacts as much as possible. So we're here holding space. And Miss Jeannie, it looks like we've got about 16 minutes or so to go. So do we have anybody else out there in the phone queue with a hand up, or anybody with a thought in the chat room for us?
No, it's all quiet. And just for general information, besides listening to today's repeat, in the notes for today, I'm also putting a link to where you did the release technique once before, and we separated a pre-recording of you walking through it. It's about a 7-minute recording, so you can either re-listen to today, or you can click on the link in the notes for today and listen to that recording.
Sweet. Maybe,
so
honey, if you've got a handle on that, maybe you could email that link to me or text that link to me. I've got somebody I'd like to send it to.
Sure.
I had just done it a few days ago with someone who's been dealing with some pretty big stresses in their lives, so I'd like to send them a copy of it. So if you're out there in listener land, we've got lots of time for conversation, and we'd love to hear from you. What's on your mind? If you're on one of those stations where we can't see you, our call-in number is 563-999-3581. 563-999-3581. And if you push 1, and we've talked over and over and over again over the years about how it's been very well established scientifically that our eye doesn't see anything happening outside of us, that it's our brain that makes up the visual pictures that we look at. So perception is a construct of the mind, and perception can be a servant of cellular memory and things that have gone on in the past, so that each time a certain perceptual experience is called into play, the mind generates that experience out of the past and uses that past experience as a substitute for what's actually happening in the moment. So many people are not seeing or experiencing what's actually going on in the world. What they're experiencing is their mind's replay of past traumas. And so perception being a construct of the mind, if we get locked in, there's a powerful line in the Course in Miracles, the lesson, What is the World? And what it says there is that perception is a skill we made up to take the place of what the Creator gave us in creation. And so, we've established that the purpose behind the forgiveness tool in Aramaic, by the mechanics of how forgiveness works, in the Aramaic language, the word forgive is shabag, and it literally means to cancel. And of course, when you think about, well, if the word that meant forgive, or we've translated, the Greek translated forgiveness means shabag or cancel, what does that mean? What am I supposed to cancel? And what we realize is that there's some Harvard research that says that the time frame where 10,000 brain cells fire, the maximum amount of data that goes into conscious awareness is 9 bits. A very tiny fragment of information becomes conscious. And so when the mind generates a construct out of the past, there are only 9 bits of data that are going into. Obviously, something has to determine which 9 bits of data are going to be used to generate the perception of the moment. And so what you realize is that the goal you hold is the driver that causes your mind to use certain data, on this occasion, and certain data on a different occasion. And so perception is driven by goals. You'll notice that, unless you're just a generally miserable person, you're pretty happy with most everybody as long as they're doing what you want them to do. In other words, as long as they're fulfilling your goals. But notice, again, unless you're a generally miserable person, the only time you're ever upset with people is when they're not fulfilling the goals you hold for them. Now you think, well, if they're not fulfilling my goals, they deserve my wrath or my hostility or my fear or my manipulation, whatever's going on. And sometimes people do pretty crazy things, and if we watch them do that, we might all agree that person really deserves your wrath, your rage, what have you. But it's kind of a trick question to ask if they deserve it, because when I generate it, I'm the one who gets the original. They only get a carbon copy. And they may not be home for delivery. So the real question I want to ask myself is, because this person doesn't follow what I want them to do, doesn't fulfill my goal, is that a reason for me to dump? Let's say if my response to try and get people back in line is rage. It's a pretty common one. If I respond in rage to try to get them to do what I want them to do, I get the original of the rage. Do I deserve that? And if I don't, maybe it's time for me to stop. And so the action of forgiving comes from canceling a goal which collapses the perceptual construct. And when a perceptual construct collapses, it collapses in on itself. So by collapsing it, by canceling the goal that's causing the mind to use this fear or this sadness or this grief or this rage to build your perception in the moment, if you collapse that and that perception collapses in on itself, it gives you closer and closer access to what's at the root of that pain or trauma. And so when you collapse that perception in on itself, it's like the conscious mind, that 9-bit space is emptied. And when it's emptied, there's room for the truth to show up. There's room for a whole different way of seeing to become available. People say, well, I had this insight over the years of teaching forgiveness and working with individuals. It always amazes me when I'm with someone who comes across this idea and cancels a goal, and what pops to awareness, what their revelation is when they cancel that goal. And it's oftentimes, oh my God, I never knew that was in me. Or the upset part, it's like, before I did this forgiveness thing, that issue, that was so big and it was so important, and man, I would rage over that any day. And now I look at it, it's like, it's really foolish. Why did I do that? Well, the only reason you did it is because it's there. And when you forgive it, that is, remove it, that's what forgiveness means, then you're freed of it. So, and it's interesting, if you look at the Course in Miracles, the definition of forgiveness there is precisely identical to the definition of forgiveness in the ancient Aramaic. In fact, if you read the passage in the Course about forgiveness, and I did not have the brain cells to recognize what these instructions meant until I had come across and understood forgiveness from the Aramaic. And there are only 2 places on the planet that I've seen an exact and specific definition of what forgiveness means. And what the Course says is, let go, of course that's the cancel, let go all the things you think you want. What are the things you think you want? Your goals. And then in the Course it refers to your goals as your trifling treasures. In other words, out of the ego, I want this, I want this, I want. And when those goals are placed in the mind, then whatever those goals resonate is what fills the mind with perception. And the truth is, most of the things that your ego says you don't want at all, except for avoidance sake. So the things you think you want become trifling treasures. So the Course says, let go all the things you think you want, your trifling treasures put away, and leave a clean and open space within your mind for love to come. What happens when we void the space of the mind of its hostility and fear? For love to fill in the blanks. And that's called revelation. And so if you're an upset, if you're a disturbance, and your mind is telling you that your upset is about what's going on out there, recognize that's not what is happening at all. Painful memories in the mind, unresolved generational traumas, literally are stored in such a way as content that they are transparently merged into those perceptual constructs. And when they show up, I mean, the same thing that went on with, one guy 5 years ago and another person 10 years ago and another person 20 years ago, when it comes up today, I say, yeah, and Hortense made me so mad. I've been through this mad, 87 different times with 42 different people. Why? Because that unresolved pain or trauma, oftentimes, that's gone on for generations, literally, energetically, is weaved, it's like a piece of cloth. It's weaved into my perceptual constructs. And when that happens, again, the title of my book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? It appears as though this particular trauma, this thing that's agonizing me today, is a separate one from the one that agonized me 6 months ago and 2 years ago and 5 years ago and 10 years ago. But when I drop into the root of it, I see that they're not all, traumas that are caused by today's unique situation. That's the lie. The underlying dynamics of denial, dissociation, projection. When I deny ownership for what's going on within me, I have to dissociate from the cause of what's going on within me. And that makes the cause of what's going on inside of me available for anyone to manipulate me into experiencing. So they do a behavior that causes that which I've been trying to hide from myself. And when those brain cells fire, they literally create the picture world that I see. They create my perception. And when I realize that perception is a projection of old content, that's when I have the opportunity to change it. But otherwise, we believe that, whatever that original trauma was, is really happening again today. And people say, well, it's just, why is this happening over and over and over and over again? Well, it only happened once. It's just been replayed over and over and over again. The truth is, it doesn't happen to you again. It's the same event. Once you
have a hand
grasp that, okay, sweetie. Well, we're down to about 90 seconds, so I'm going to just continue with these thoughts. We really don't have time to do another conversation, so I'm just going to finish this thought, and the show will be complete. But please call early tomorrow, so we've got lots of time to talk. Whoever's got their hand up. So my take is, and I'm saying this from personal experience, there's been a new level for me in engaging in this understanding and these tools, that having seen how when I cancel a goal and I free myself of a trauma, what frees me of the trauma is that all of a sudden I get a different construct. I get this revelatory information that it's always based in love at that moment. And it opens the space to honor truth on deeper and deeper levels. And one of the key thoughts about changing the content of the mind is that if you like your lies, you're going to always see them. And if there's hostility or fear going on in your mind, it's a lie. When you cancel, collapse, forgive, the revelation is yours. And everything changes. But you've got to